So hi Ryan, thanks
Hi.
for coming in. So tell me, why did you decide to run for school trustee? Obviously you have some experience, well some is understanding. You've had a lot of experience in the city council.
Yep.
So tell me, why did you run?
Well, it happened pretty spontaneously. My wife and I were looking at the list of registered candidates, and one of the things happened in particular is that we had heard a rumor of some people that were thinking of running. Like there were slates. Like I don't know if you've heard of someone named Patrick Alal.
Of course.
And other people in the anti-vaxxer community who we had heard were quietly organizing basically slates all over the place. And we were concerned. We were concerned that there was possibly, radical anti-science type activists who were going to maybe sneak in. So that was what initially caused us to take a closer look.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that Ward 3, which is not the ward I live in the old St. Mattel area, which is in the bounds of Ward 2. But Ward 3, which is South St. Mattel, the neighborhood I grew up in, where my parents live and where all my high school friends were from, and kind of my old stomping grounds. That was there was current at the time that I decided to do it. There was only one registered candidate for 3 spots,
Really?
and so essentially, I saw an opportunity and seized it. There was a couple of issues in particular that I'd been thinking about.
Those are
the idea of offering swimming lessons through school, and tackling the traffic problems around especially elementary and junior high schools.
Now, I want you to touch on those traffic problems.
Yes.
That's new to me.
Yes. So in my 8 years at City Hall, one of the very frequent issues that I ran into and that people called me about was basically anarchy outside of particularly elementary schools. I mean, high schools, a little less so because the students there are more independent. They can walk to school, even drive to school sometimes. They get themselves to school. But elementary school kids under the age of 10, especially under the age of 12, which is the legal age at which a person can, or a child can act independently without parental or guardians or adult supervision, they all get taken to school. And when many of our schools were built, especially in older neighborhoods, basically any school built before 1950, 60, or even 70, it used to be the norm in my parents' generation, and certainly the generation before that, for upwards of 80, 90% of students to arrive at school on foot. That was Windsor Park was built that way. In fact, this neighborhood was built such that there are interconnected pathways between each residential area, so that the premise of this neighborhood when it first started construction in 1950 was that no child would ever have to cross a busy road. Now, changes to catchment areas and schools opening and closing have sort of diluted that original vision. But that is the idea in general is that kids used to walk to school.
Yeah.
An overwhelming majority did. And then throughout the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, we saw an almost complete change to today, where most elementary schools, especially those in more suburban areas, have upwards of 95% of students arriving by car. And what that causes is basically chaos. It's simple geometry. A car takes up a certain amount of space. There's only a certain amount of space in front of the school. It's physically impossible to get 300 cars directly in front of the door of a school every single day.
Takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it takes time.
Yeah.
And since every student arrives at school at the same time, for the most part, within a half an hour window, it means that basically is going to be total chaos every single day. And this is a problem outside every single elementary and junior high school that in the area that I worked in and across the entire city. And really across Canada and North America.
It's also, we're totally getting a different conversation, but we're getting into a conversation of urban design too.
Well, exactly. And I had the thought for a number of years that the division and schools could play a more active role in that issue. Basically, right now it's essentially considered it's only the school or the school division's business the moment students basically come onto the school property. But I think that the trip to school, the trip from school, as part of the educational experience. All scientific data shows that people who, young people and adults who have a 10-15 minute walk, activates the brain, gets the blood moving, it helps people. But if conversely, if there are students having, and there are, who are basically having what amounts to a highly stressful quasi-survival situation experience every single day before school, on their way to school, they are alert, vigilant, looking around, because if they don't, their life is literally in danger. And that applies to their parents too. Essentially everybody, every parent and every student starts their day stressed out. And that's a terrible way to start the day. It's a terrible way to arrive at school to be ready to be educated. And then you finish the day the same. A little less so in the afternoons because there's a bit more flexibility about coming and going, but certainly in the mornings, the divisions. Now some schools do have programs, things like walking school buses and so forth, but not nearly what we could be doing. And I see the school division and all of our schools as basically community stakeholders. They are institutions that are right at the beating heart of every single neighborhood they are in, and they're the closest thing that we have to basically a hub of the community. And I think that the division has a lot of institutional muscle that it could be using in terms of working with other levels of government like the city and province, or creating programming all on its own, or just straight up education, safety education, and training. Like it's literally a skill. It's a skill to know how to get to school. It's a skill to know what the shortcuts are, what the safe streets are, what the dangerous streets are, what the ideal route is. And so I dealt with these issues over and over and over again and heard the same issue at every school, whether it's in Island Lakes or Old St. Boniface. And I realized this is a problem everywhere, and this is something that the division can play a role in.
Let's touch on that background that you have on City Council.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do to transfer those skills from City Council to a school trustee board? Good
question. So I was an assistant. I was never the guy in the big chair, so to speak, right? But in my
But you still did important work.
I did, and in my previous role with Matt Allard, the councillor for St. Boniface, he empowered me a great deal to pursue a vision, pursue an agenda, pursue projects in the community, and to take a very active role in the political life of the job. During that time, I had many experiences, both good and bad, that I think informed my view and my understanding and skill in dealing in essentially how group environments work, how political environments work, how decision making is done. There's this thing that Matt Allard taught me about called the political administrative dichotomy. And which
you're gonna have to explain that to me.
Absolutely.
For our viewers too.
For sure. So the political administrative dichotomy essentially is at the decision-making level, you have the politicians, elected people, and you have the administration. So the administration runs the division. They are the day-to-day operations people. Mm-hmm. And then you have the elected people who are play an oversight role and have support the sort of high-level strategic direction. And those two sides kind of meet, and they have some overlapping and intersecting responsibilities, but they are distinct from one another. And their relationship can either be collaborative or it can be confrontational, depending on the needs of the needs of the moment, or the style and character of the people in the two spheres. But overall, it's an important dichotomy because both spheres will always be trying to push up against each other's responsibilities. They're sort of like locked in a never-ending kind of stalemate with each other. And the political oversight role of an elected school board is something that just last year we and many other parents and activists fought to protect. The government.
Bill 64.
Bill 64.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that.
Yes.
Yeah, you go on, though.
So I volunteered a ton on the Stop Bill 64 campaign. I put up yard signs and I door knocked, and I had the yard sign on my house, and I delivered them and put out pamphlets and spoke on social media because what the government's plan was to eliminate elected boards completely and replace them with, this was long before I had ever thought of myself running for one of those elected boards. Mm-hmm. But their plan was to replace it with essentially completely top-down decision-making and eliminate that balance relationship between elected and administrative spheres, and replace it with an oversight model which was completely opaque, where decisions are made completely behind closed doors, and where the person to whom is ultimately accountable is, instead of accountable downward to the public and everybody, they're accountable up only to their bosses. So in this case, the only way for an average citizen to express or exercise influence and power over the direction of education would be essentially all the way up to the political party and premier that was in charge at the time. Mm. And of course, that decision of whether or not to give or take away a vote from that political party would have to be balanced against all of the other many extremely important areas that are also in the purview of that government. So ultimately what would have happened is that the public would have had far less stake in a stake and control and knowledge about what decisions were being made and why and by who. Yeah. So that was an important principle to protect, and we successfully protected it. And now I am excited to be in the process of exercising that capacity.
Yeah. So Ryan, what do you do during the day? What's your day job?
Well, I just started a new job this week, actually. I'm
Really?
the new director of Save Our Seine. So it's a nonprofit based here in Southeast Winnipeg, whose mandate since 1994 is the protection, preservation, and enhancement of the natural spaces along the Seine River corridor. So that organization does everything from political and policy advocacy to running summer cleanup operations, keeping the river free of debris and garbage in the summer, and applying for grants, obtaining funding, and initiating new projects to further enhance the natural space and create recreational opportunities through there. So we just started that. And then I also have a little side hustle working for a friend of mine's e-commerce business, which sells construction and agricultural equipment. And so I do marketing materials for them. Yeah, but that's just kind of on the side.
So it can't go without saying that you're a guy who's really involved in the community, and you've worked for Marada, you've done some activism yourself. Mm-hmm. Where does that stem from?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I suppose I have always in my life had a sort of outward-facing disposition. I have always been observant and had strong opinions and
not afraid to voice them either.
No, and which hasn't always thrilled people. I don't know. It sort of just came about organically throughout my life. Just became interested in things and started to get active and stuff.
You remember the first time you stepped up in activism?
When I was in junior high, I was collecting recycling out of my school's garbage bin to divert it from the landfill. Did that for a while. I thought this was the first direct action I took. My first political action was actually with Matt Allard. He was when he ran for Member of Parliament in 2006. I volunteered on his campaign when I was in high school. So I was 17 years old, and there was an election that year. And so I signed up based on his website, because he was one of the only candidates who had a website at the time. And then he called me when I filled out the little online form. He called me at my parents' house like an hour later after I filled out the form, and invited me to an event the next morning where we were waving at cars on Marion and Taché. And basically from that day forward,
it's kind of where it all started.
and then basically from that day forward, I was hooked into the life.
It's a really great story.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything you'd like to add before we part ways?
I suppose the other thing is swimming lessons in schools.
Yeah.
I think that we can do that.
Well, the Winnipeg School Division does it, don't
That's
they?
right.
Yeah.
That's right. In fact, that's exactly what I was saying to everybody when I was door knocking.
Really?
Winnipeg School Division brought it in for grade 4 and 5 students, and but they had these pools that are not really used very much during the day, and we have the capacity to create a budget and organize it. Other than that, I guess I would just say I think this is a great program that you're running here, and you guys are doing a great job. You have been interviewed by a fair number of people and dealt with a lot of media, and you guys are just as professional and on the ball, maybe even more so than some of the ones I've run into for a lot of years. So good on you.
Well, thanks. It's all thanks to our great instructors here at ATC.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you.